This is Boomer Life on CIL 650.
If I had $1 million, if I had
$1 million, I think I would have spent more time out in the sun this year. Welcome to Boomer Life. We're talking today about financial planning. A thought-out plan for your financial future. The most important thing, but who do you go to? What are the questions that you ask? Well, you have to have trust. And one of the people in this industry who has built up trust so well and so long is Jim Doyle, Senior Financial Consultant with Investors Group Financial Services. He's had 27 years at it. He's got more letters after his name as he's improved himself over the years in understanding how to better help you with your financial planning. He needs 2 alphabets. I got to tell you about that. You know, we were talking, Jim, just before the break about, you know, how long do you plan to live or do you think you might live? And, you know, you have to plan for the what-ifs. And it is known that women have tended to outlive men, that men have lived on healthier lifestyles. Ignore those donuts that were sitting over there. And so have shorter life expectancies. That probably presents a whole raft of planning issues, especially for couples and women for that matter, as they're likely to be the ones making all the investment decisions at some point, either for the aging couple or as a survivor.
We met with a couple earlier this week, and the realization that she might be in the role of taking on all of these responsibilities, okay, was incredibly daunting, okay? But our offer to actually be there as she went through this process, you could see that the stress was just leaving her face, okay? And I think by the time we finished up that meeting, I think she felt an awful lot better than before we started it.
Yeah, that's you take stress out of the situation, then you can start moving ahead mentally. So it's not just the longer living, but also the living with assorted health needs as we age, the uptake of new medical knowledge, technologies. Who knows what the upper limit of life expectancy is going to look like? In the future, the best is, I guess, to plan for a long life.
You know, it wasn't that long ago that the scientists were exploring the possibilities of life expectancies, and they didn't expect that we'd be breaching the 90-year barrier. But we're seeing it more and more often. You know, the largest growing segment of the Canadian population right now is the plus 85 group, okay? That means there's a whole bunch of issues that are coming to the forefront that were never there before.
What are some of those things? Is it that too much life left at the end of the money, if I could put it that bluntly?
Well, I think it's simple issues like housing. You know, where are you going to live? Okay, you got maintenance on your home. You know, do you want to put your money into supporting your house, or do you want to use it to do things with your kids and your family? You're going to be paying for transportation in some way, shape, or form. You know, can you drive? Do you drive? How many vehicles do you keep active? You know, your health care, who's going to provide it? Do you need a little bit of help with some things? You know, you're going to pay for some people to, come into your home and start doing some things for you. Okay, it's really about living a quality life and planning to live a quality life.
So what is it? What is the old analogy about packing to go on vacation? Pack all the clothes, figure out how much money you need, then take half the clothes and twice the money. But planning to live, looking 35 years, 40 years down the road, if you retire at 55, if you're that lucky, not that easy, because you're so much. Look back at how much change we've seen in the last 25 years, and think of what's coming ahead in the next 25 years, and that's hard for people to do. Whereas you have more of the tools that can, give you some thoughts and guidelines.
Well, again, as I mentioned, we can't take all the risk and all the uncertainty out of this picture. But if I can engage them in a process of making the best guesses that we can, and those course corrections, I think, that need to be happening on a regular basis, that's the greatest value I think we can bring to these discussions.
Let's talk about some what-ifs. A single person, they still got a home, they may have a mortgage on it, things like that. Do you advise them to maybe take care of that, get rid of that as quickly as they can?
I hate things that are, everybody should do this type of perspective, because it really should be looked at, not only in terms of what's important to you today, but what are you giving up or what are you receiving at some point in the future, okay? Let's take RSPs as an example, okay? You build them up all during your lifetime and you save all that wonderful amount of taxes. But one of the complaints that we hear, you take them back out, guess who's holding out their hand? Taxman.
Their government.
Okay? So you spend all your money and you don't have that somewhere down the road, okay? That's not much fun either. So it's a question of balance, okay? What's the right choices, okay? We touched on a little bit earlier how a lot of seniors, retirees, are experiencing sizable tax bills that they never anticipated as part of their retirement, okay? And part of that is because they never really took a good look at where their retirement income was going to come from, what the tax consequences are of accessing that money, okay? And in today's lifestyle, you seem to be helping out the kids an awful lot more frequently than you ever planned for as part of your retirement. And when you go and you access those assets and you trigger those capital gains, and you go, whoops, okay, I didn't plan for that, okay? That's where life is needing a bit more help.
That is not an uncommon problem with this, I guess, even the sandwich generation, people who are perhaps in their 50s and they're still helping the kids and maybe helping the mom and dad out. They've got a plan for how do I put money away for a future. The other thing that I've heard complaints about, just as you were mentioning, the tax whack and what to do. Like if you're at what point do I start taking money out of my RRSP and putting it maybe in a tax-free savings account to help protect us, just so if something happened, to say in our case, both of us, we have one child, and all of that money was going to come out of my RRSP, I've heard that up to half of that could wind up going to the tax man.
Particularly in the year that you might pass away, heaven forbid we say stuff like that. But it doesn't stop there, okay? Once you hit that magical age of 65 and you look at it receiving some wonderful tax credits that you never got before, like the age tax credit, okay? That's a beautiful thing, okay? Or you're getting the pension tax credit and so forth. You want to take a look at what sort of things negatively impact you when you make some of your choices. And this is where the planning sometimes falls down. So imagine, you take $100,000 out of your non-registered investments, you trigger, let's say $50,000 in capital gains, okay? And now all of a sudden, the following year, they're taking back your OAS, Whoops, who planned for that, okay? You never want to find that experience going on.
Well, I think, there's a bullet point that you should remember right there. For every action in financial planning or not planning, there is an equal repercussion, good or bad. And in this case, like if you start dipping into that RRSP, maybe before you plan to, you can get hit pretty hard. So, again, something that you have to talk to with a person you trust, a tax plan or a financial planner, such as Jim here. And if you want to contact Jim or Paige Brettel, who we'll be talking to in the next segment, by the way, you can call 604-682-5431 or contact Jim Doyle at investorsgroup.com. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the what ifs. Let's have a look at the planner who reviews your options when it comes to accessing funds to help out the kids. We talked about that sandwich generation a little bit. TFSAs. Does it make sense to borrow money to help your kids out sometimes better than say, dipping into your funds?
I think absolutely. And this is the real value that we bring to this whole discussion, okay? Where do we take money from, okay? Do we trigger a capital gain, okay? Do we take it from RSPs or RIFs, okay? Do we need that money somewhere down the road that we haven't quite accounted for yet, okay? Today's rates are relatively inexpensive. If you've got lots of cash flow and you got big tax burdens, maybe you want to borrow in that type of an environment. But it's not necessarily right for everybody. And that's the discussion that we want to have. What does your plan say? Okay? Follow your plan. Create your plan. Let the plan do the driving for you, and then adjust accordingly.
Okay, so if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Somebody told me that once about operating a budget. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it, and you must always be in contact with the people who can tell you, okay, here's where you are today. What do you think's changed? Well, I lost my job. I'm going to change jobs. So many things that you have to be in touch with the person you trust. Keep that in mind. All right. So, Jim, imagine, let's talk about the example of somebody who's retiring and has a business on the side. Are there again, your pensions, your government pensions, RSP pensions or supplements that you're going to have to consider what to do with?
It's a wonderful conversation because we're seeing more and more people either continuing to work part-time post-retirement, or they're running a business post-retirement. And now the question becomes, if you haven't taken your CPP and your OAS and you're eligible for them, should you? Okay? You may be RIF age eligible, but again, should you? Okay, so there's no sense taking all this income, earning all this income from your business and giving it back through taxes and through social benefit repayment. You might be better off to take that later on.
Tax bills. Some people just sort of say, well, man, did I ever get hit hard this year? And a lot of that could be alleviated, or some of it alleviated with a bit better planning.
We see it every single day in our practice. Okay, people have a plan of attack in their mind, and sometimes we just have to hold them back just a little bit. This week I had an individual that we worked with, and a wonderful person, just a wonderful person. And she decided how much she wanted to give us as an RSP contribution, because she had sold her place the previous year, and she had a fair bit of money left over. Okay, and she said, Jim, I want to put that in my RSP. And I said, well, would you be terribly offended if I said I don't want quite that much, because you're going to be wasting some of your RSP tax refund. If you spread it out over 2 years, you can actually put more of that tax money back in your pocket.
Well, I think you're beginning to understand, folks, that the evidence is there that if you work with your financial planner, you can have significant benefits for your wealth and financial well-being. We're going to have more with Jim Doyle and his stalwart assistant, Paige Brettle, coming up. We're going to talk about other things like how young people may not, we talk about older people who are at that certain age that should be planning. You're never too young. Paige is what we call a millennial, so she understands probably better than most people her age that now is the time, and don't leave it any longer. We're going to have more on that coming up next on Boomer Life.
Canada's only weekly radio show dedicated to the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CIL 650.